Put yourself in position to win big on Kentucky Derby Day with the power of daily racing form. Visit shop.drf.com and get past performances, expert picks, betting strategies, clock reports, and more. Again, that's shop.drf.com.
Hi, everyone. Glad you've joined us for the Daily Racing Form Kentucky Derby webinar. I'm Brad Free and looking forward to the conversation over the next hour with handicapping legend Andy Beyer. He's the author of Picking Winners, Beyer on Speed, my $50,000 year at the races. He also created Beyer Speed Figures, one of the most widely used handicapping tools available exclusively in daily racing form. And even though Andy did not come up with Rich Strike last year at odds of 80-1, he did come up with Medina Spirit 2 years ago, $26.20, and we are happy to have him back. Andy, thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Well, thank you. I mean, Medina Spirit was a thrill. At least I'm off the schneid in this millennium. So.
I don't know how you missed Rich Strike last year, but you know what? We'll see if we can break your 2-year your losing streak in the Derby. That was a very clever selection 2 years ago with Medina Spirit, and we have a lot of ground to cover. So let's not get bogged down in brief conversation. We do plan to address the entire Derby field. So no matter who wins the 2023 Derby on Saturday, he's going to at least get a mention by Andy and or myself, and we're going to take the field in approximate order of the morning line. But before we go horse by horse, Andy and I are going to touch briefly on two key elements to this year's Kentucky Derby. One of them regards the overall quality of this year's Derby field, and secondly, an apparently murky pace scenario. Andy, with all due respect to champion juvenile colt Forte, it appears that there are no superstars in this year's lineup. Would you agree? And if so, how does that possibly influence your approach to handicapping this year's field?
Well, the speed figures for this Derby overall are about as weak as I've ever seen. And parenthetically, the Kentucky Oaks looks even worse. I don't know what's happened to all the good horses, but I mean, in the Derby field, no one has run a figure of more than 100 on the dirt. I mean, that is kind of, every Derby should have a bunch of horses in triple digits. So it's not good. And I think, it might suggest a reason to go a little bit off the wall or get a little creative, because nobody's got that real solid dope.
One of the cliches that I sometimes lean on out here in California, when a race comes up particularly weak, as it appears this year's Derby field does, sometimes I use the cliche, a new face in a weak race. And what I mean by a new face, it could be a first-time starter, a comebacker, an import, a surface switcher, a distance switcher, somebody trying something new, entering into the field and possibly springing an upset. So we're going to find out a little bit more if Andy and I follow that kind of strategy or philosophy into this year's Derby, because it does not look like the strongest Derby field that we have seen. It also has come up as an incredibly confusing situation with regards to pace. And this became clear a few weeks ago. Andy, there's no real true speed, gassy type horse in this field. And to me, it kind of makes it a little bit more complicated to analyze this year's field. What's your thoughts on the pace scenario?
Well, as you say, it's murky at best. I mean, Reincarnate, could be the horse with the most speed. Derma Sotagaki, won in Dubai, leading all the way. I mean, I don't know how hip the Japanese connections are to, the importance of like early speed in a race like the Derby, but he could be out there. But there's no groovy in this year's field.
Yeah, there's no Groovy for sure. I'm not sure who's going to make the lead. There are several candidates, of course, Reincarnate and Dermisotogaki, chief among those. Here's a look at the entire field that have drawn into the body of the race. There are 3 also eligibles that Andy and I will discuss toward the end of the webinar, but there's a look at the field. The morning line favorite is number 15, Forte. Second choice on the morning line, number 5, Tapit, Trice, Angel of Empire at 8-1. Those are the only 3 horses listed in single digits. It looks to me like a great betting race. The Kentucky Derby often is. That's a look at the field. And now it's time to start dissecting every one of these 20 starters. And let's start off talking about the morning line favorite. All he's done is win 5 in a row, including the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last year. He is Forte, listed at odds of 3-1. He won the Florida Derby last time out. Let's take a look at the past performances of Forte and Mage. 1-2 finishers last time out in the Florida Derby. And as Andy alluded to earlier, no real fast horses in this field. A 95 Beyer in the Florida Derby last time out. I don't know, Andy. I don't know that Forte is the type of 3-1 favorite that I would want to lean on. What's your take with regards to last year's champion 2-year-old?
I feel the same. There are a lot of things I don't like about him. I mean, his 2-year-old form was fine. He did everything right. He won the Breeders' Cup, got a figure of 100. You look for horses coming to the Derby and 2-year-olds turning 3 to be stepping forward. And, and I don't see Forte doing that. I mean, his win over Mage, I mean, he had to work to beat a horse who'd run once in his life. And my other, qualm about Forte is Todd Pletcher. I mean, he's one of the most successful trainers ever, but there's one thing he's not successful at, and that's winning the Kentucky Derby. I mean, he's great at managing and spreading out, his huge stable around the country. But when it comes to, pointing that one horse for the maximum race, in the Derby, I mean, he's 2 for 62. So, Forte doesn't get extra consideration for being in the Pletcher barn, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I agree. And if he does have an advantage, I just don't see that it is significant. Yes, he's won 5 in a row. He won the Breeders' Cup last year. He 2 for 2 this year. Those are all qualities, but we're trying to find the winner of a 1.25 mile race on the first Saturday in May. And look, Forte can win this race. A lot of horses that we don't like could win this. I just don't think that 3-1 is the right price to take on Forte. As for Mage, this is a good horse. I thought he ran as well as Forte last time out. And when we take a look at the replay of the Florida Derby, you'll see what I mean. In fact, let's go ahead and take a look right now. And that's Forte in about 6th on the outside. And here comes Mage, is just going to blow right past Forte. Now, some people believe that Forte got stuck in traffic right there. I didn't see that he got stopped at all. I just saw that Mage made perhaps a premature move, blew past Forte like he was standing still. And from here, it's just a question of whether Mage can get the trip or not. Turns out he could not. And Forte, who maybe this was a good ride by Irad Ortiz, just to stay cool and figure he's going to wear down Mage in deep stretch, which is exactly what happened. But I thought that Mage, if he maybe times his move a little later, maybe he springs an upset. I guess the problem with Mage for me, Andy, is that he's only started 3 times. He didn't start as a 2-year-old. He habitually breaks slowly from the gate. What's your quick take as far as Mage goes?
That he hasn't done enough. I mean, people laugh about the curse of Apollo, who managed to win the Derby in 1882, I think, without racing as a 2-year-old, but only 2 horses have done it since. And I've always believed that you just need a solid foundation of experience and fitness to win the Derby, and he doesn't have it. Even though he ran a very good race in the Florida Derby, I don't see him finishing in the top 10.
I know. We could look back and say, well, Justify did not race as a 2-year-old, but Justify, I think, is widely known now, was just a bona fide freak. He was
Yeah.
faster than everybody else in the field. And so what? Let's just, before we turn the page and start talking about some of the other horses in this field, I just want to make one quick point regarding 2-year-old champions, Breeders' Cup juvenile winners, and how difficult it is for a Breeders' Cup juvenile winner to reproduce his form as a 3-year-old and even hit the board. And over the years, there have been 21 Breeders' Cup juvenile winners who made it to the Kentucky Derby. Only 2 winners, Street Sense and Nyquist in 06 and 17. Good Magic finished second in 2017. You have to go back a ways for Timber Country and Chief's Crown. So it's a historical challenge to maintain superiority over your crop as a 2-year-old and continue at age 3. And I think in this day and age, there's maybe more of a disconnect between 2-year-old form in fall and spring form as a 3-year-old. So it's a tough, tall order for Forte. Could he win the race? Absolutely, he could. But I think that both Andy and I are on the same page that we think that a 3-1 probably not the greatest gamble.
When I saw this compilation, I went back and looked a little in the history books, and in the 1970s, it was before the Breeders' Cup, but of course we had a 2-year-old champion. 6 2-year-old champions in that decade went on to win the Derby, and they were horses like Seattle Slew, Affirmed, and of course Secretariat. We just haven't had great horses in America on that level, so that's a factor too.
No doubt about it. That's another challenge facing Forte, in addition to his closing style in a race that could unfold at a relatively tepid clip. And I'm with Andy as far as Mage goes. A good horse, ran as well as Forte in the Florida Derby, but he hasn't done enough quite yet. Okay, let's go to the second choice on the morning line. Another Todd Pletcher trainee. His name is Tapit Trice. And Tapit Trice, when he won that allowance race February 4th at Gulfstream Park, I thought, wow, here's the horse. He came back in the Tampa Bay Derby, and it was not impressive at all. And then he turned it around in the Bluegrass. Andy, what about Tapit Trice? And here's that guy Pletcher again.
Despite my qualms about Pletcher, I mean, I view Tapit Trice as as a legitimate contender in this race. I thought his Bluegrass was pretty good. I mean, he's a horse who doesn't have much speed. There was not a lot of pace in that race, so the jockey really had to hit the gas and kind of make a premature move, just to get into contention. And then he won a stretch duel against a good horse and in Verifying. I thought that was a good solid performance.
It was a very good performance. That 99 Beyer is the second fastest last out dirt figure in the field, and he did run well, and so did Verifying. Let's take a look at the stretch run of the Bluegrass, and just from a visual perspective, I thought this was one of the more stronger prep races that we've seen. That's Verifying on the inside, Tapit Trice on the outside, and boy, this is a ding-dong battle right down to the wire until deep stretch. And that's when Tapit Trice said, see you later. And he took care of business like a colt that will appreciate the 1 1/4 distance of the Kentucky Derby. Verifying ran super in defeat. He finished far clear of third. A couple of very good horses in top form. I'm always a little bit hesitant to back a horse coming out of the Bluegrass. The last Bluegrass winner to win the Kentucky Derby was Strike the Gold back in 1991. It just seems to be one of those funky type surfaces. I remember before synthetic, it was a pro speed track, and then synthetic, which was a throwout anyway. And nowadays, I don't know, it just seems like the Bluegrass has not historically been the most productive type of prep race. Having said that, Andy, I think we just saw 2 good colts coming to the wire in the Bluegrass. What about the runner-up Verifying? Can he stay 1 1/4, or is it too far for him?
I don't know about that, but he ran well. His figures are good. I'm not gonna. I wouldn't toss him if I were, kind of spreading out in exotics.
I totally agree. And he did not have a good trip in his previous start. He finished 4th, but he returned to form last time out. He also has just enough tactical speed, Verifying does, to be forwardly placed. And if the pace does come up slow, like it looks like it could, Verifying's going to get the jump on Tapit Trice again. It's just a question of whether he can stay the trip.
And plus, he's trained by Brad Cox, who never loses. So.
Well, he doesn't lose anymore. I mean, he's got a deep stable. He does a great job, and he wins a lot of races. And I think he has 4 in the field this year. So you have to beat Brad Cox in these very big races, no matter what time of year it happens to be. Tapit Trice, we agree, is a contender. Verifying, if you like Tapit Trice, you have to like Verifying, or at least respect his chances. Third choice on the morning line is another come from behinder. He is, speaking of Brad Cox, his Angel of Empire. And we're going to take a look at it. There's his PPs right there. This is a horse that has improved every single dirt race. I mean, you talk about progression. There it is, from a 58 to a 74 to an 85 to an 89 to a 94. Now, Andy, my question is, 94, it's still not quite fast enough, is it?
No, and I didn't think that Arkansas Derby field was too much at all. I mean, again, I always get a little gun shy when I see Brad Cox and I want to throw him out. I mean, he's the number of times he wins in your face, when you minimize him, are plentiful. But I just don't think this horse has shown that he's good enough for this group.
Well, the numbers would certainly support that argument. Visually, I might take a little bit different opinion, though. Let's roll the tape of the stretch run of the Arkansas Derby and Angel of Empire. Now, look, maybe there wasn't much behind him. That's Angel of Empire right there, Reincarnate with the yellow cap right inside him. When a horse wins the final Derby prep by more than 4 lengths, I'm going to stand up and take notice, even though the number came back a little soft and maybe his rivals were not much. This is a horse that pretty much dominated this race in deep stretch. I agree. The figure was not that great. And the runner-up was not that great either. But I thought Angel of Empire ran at least well enough to command respect. And I have him among my top choices in the Derby. Andy, let's talk briefly about Reincarnate. You mentioned him earlier as a potential pace setter, and I agree, despite the fact he hasn't been on the lead in either one of his last 2 starts. What is it that you see that could potentially lead for an odds-beating effort by Reincarnate?
Well, just looking at the PP lines, his races in California, he was dueling for the lead. I mean, pace in your neck of the woods was always pretty hot. I think that any trainer or jockey who looks at this field and looks at this horse's dope has to be thinking, let's go to the front.
No doubt about it. And Johnny Velasquez is a master at that in the Kentucky Derby. He's won 3 of the last 6 Kentucky Derbies with pace setting or pace pressing performances. And I think he recognizes, as well as any jockey, the importance of speed in this particular race. And that's Reincarnate's really his only chance. He was eliminated at the break in the Rebel, whether that was self-caused trouble by a slow start or not. I thought he ran very well in the Rebel. His Arkansas Derby last time out, though, it was another step backward. And I just wonder, it seems that since leaving the Baffert stable, or maybe he just peaked too early, it seems that Reincarnate might possibly be headed the wrong way. Would you agree with that assessment or not, Andy?
Could be. I mean, the only thing I really like about him is the prospect that he could be the speed in a paceless race. But I agree with you. I don't think he's good enough to win, probably under any circumstances.
If he runs back to the sham, I give him an outside chance. I also don't think he's going to be 50-1, which is the morning line odds at the track. Our odds maker, Daily Racing Forms line maker, David Aragona, put Reincarnate at 20-1, which seems a lot more realistic. If you're looking for a crazy horse at a big price, you could do worse than a gray who potentially could make the lead under Johnny V. Okay, let's go to the 4th choice in the field, and that is Santa Anita Derby winner, Practical Move. Boy, this horse has really turned it around since stretching to 2 turns and changing jockeys to Ramon Vasquez, Practical Move has turned into a different animal. And Andy, he comes into the race with the highest dirt figures in the field. What's your take on Practical Move?
I got to respect him off those figures. I think he's had two pretty easy trips. I mean, when he won the San Felipe, there was no doubt in my mind that that was a real rail favoring day at Santa Anita. And that helped him, and it hurt some of the others, such as Skinner, who was parked wide. Next time out, the track was even, but he still had a rail trip most of the way, so it didn't have any adversity. Whereas as we look at Skinner's PPs again in that Santa Anita Derby, he was he was 3 wide most of the way. That brings him right together. I mean, I would just on kind of on their form here, they look pretty even to me. And, Skinner's going to be double or triple the odds. I think he's certainly a good throw in your exotics. And I wouldn't eliminate Practical Move as a contender, but I think Skinner's the value of these two.
Well, Skinner is progressing. He's getting better race by race by race. Practical Move, I don't know if he has any more improvement in him. I want to make one other point regarding Practical Move. And look, you have to respect a horse who's 3 for 3 around 2 turns and enters with the fastest dirt figs in the field. When he won the Los Alamitos Futurity, odds-on favorite Arabian Lion finished dead last. When Practical Move won the San Felipe, his main rival, National Treasure, scratched out of the race. In the Santa Anita Derby, Practical Move's main rival, Go Rocket Ride, scratched out of the race. So Practical Move has kind of been leading a charmed life, and I give him all the credit in the world for taking advantage of those situations and crossing the wire first. But he has had some breaks go his way. Let's roll the tape of the stretch run of the Santa Anita Derby. And after 2 decisive route wins, Practical Move had a fight on his hands in the Santa Anita Derby. He made a premature move. I think Ramon Vasquez might have made a mistake. He asked him early. He engaged with the 50-1 shot, put him away. And then in deep stretch, Mandarin Hero, the Japanese horse, 2 wide, Skinner on the outside. Practical Move dug in, held them all off, and he did not let anybody pass on the gallop out as well. So he's a good horse. I respect his grit, his determination, his figures. He's had a lot of breaks go his way, and I'm not sure about 1 1/4 miles. I want to talk briefly about Skinner, who's a horse that I respect greatly. Each race by Skinner has been better than the one before. He has had wide trips, as Andy alluded to. He gets a jockey switch to Juan Hernandez, and Skinner is training like an absolute beast. And the fact that he finished 3rd last time out, I don't mind that at all. I just want to see a horse moving forward. In fact, if you look over the last few years of the Kentucky Derby, horses that finish 3rd and or 4th often provide giant prices in the Kentucky Derby. Let's take a quick peek at the chart of some of the recent Derby winners who finished 3rd or lower in their final prep. Rich Strike, he's impossible to find. He ran 3rd in his prep. He finished 163, paid 163. Country House, Mind That Bird, another impossible result. Giacomo, trained by John Sheriffs like Skinner. Big Number, Thunder Gulch, Sea Hero, Unbridled, and Ferdinand. They all ran less than, they were out of the exacta in their final prep, and that's one reason why they paid so much. So just because a horse did not finish in the top 2, I don't think that's reason enough to throw him out. And I think that often causes some inflated prices. I like Skinner quite a bit. I think he wants every bit of 1 1/4 miles. I think he's a little bit more than just a toss-in, as Andy suggested. Let's move on to the horse that's trying to break a long, I don't know if you call it a curse, but Dermis Sotogake, who is listed at 10-1, it will try to become the first horse to hit the board in the Kentucky Derby after prepping in the United Arab Emirates. He's a Japanese bred. He defeated Continuar by 10 lengths in the UAE Derby. They're both in the Kentucky Derby. Andy, Dermis Sotogake, how's he going? What's different about him as opposed to the 18 other Dubai to Kentucky Derby shippers that we've seen over the years.
He's a better horse, among other things. There are two elements that I like about him. One was simply his performance in the Dubai race. Now, 3 years ago, there a horse named Mendelssohn won the UAE Derby, and the time was very fast. And we estimated the speed figure of 106. Put that in the daily racing form, and then of course watched him lose by 70 lengths. Derma Sotogake ran even faster than Mendelssohn. This was by and when you compare the time with the times of the other stakes races that day, this was just a very fast performance. I'm not going to have the chutzpah to try to assign a Beyer speed figure to the Dubai race, but it was very good. But the other factor is a more overriding one. When I started looking at more closely at these horses, I think it is fair to say that Japan, which used to be a laughing stock on the world racing stage, is poised to become, the number one racing power in the world. I mean, eclipsing Great Britain and the United States. I mean, their horses, we don't see much of them over here just because of the distance, but they're winning, the big money races everywhere. And they, just this year, they won the $20 million Saudi Cup, the $12 million Dubai World Cup. And they've won the big races in Hong Kong. They've won the most prestigious race in Australia. And remember a couple of years ago, they won 2 races at the Breeders' Cup. One was a filly named Marsh Lorraine, who, in terms of impossibility, she's right up, looked like she ranked right up there with Rich Strike and Mind That Bird, and she won and paid 50 to 1. What happened in Japan dates back to like around 1990, after when Sunday Silence was our horse of the year at 89 and then was retired. The American breeding industry just shunned him. They didn't think he had the pedigree, didn't think he had the conformation. He was sold to Japan, and he has transformed that breed. I mean, he was like the 12-time leading sire. Then he sired a horse named Deep Impact, who won the Japanese Triple Crown. Everybody wanted to breed to Sunday Silence then, and Deep Impact became a 10-time leading sire there. They've got this Sunday Silence blood running through all their horses, and it's just a different breed over there. So I think combining that, kind of that worldview with the fact that Derma Sotogake just ran a very good race before coming to the Derby. It's a double-barreled argument in favor of him.
Well, it's a better breed in Japan, no doubt about it. And this is kind of one of the points that we talked about earlier. If, in fact, this year's U.S. 3-year-old division is as weak as we perceive it to be, isn't this the ideal scenario for a horse from Japan and UAE to come over and perhaps spring an upset? And if, in fact, Derma Sotogake did run faster than Mendelssohn, Andy, I don't quarrel at all with the 106 Beyer speed figure that you gave Mendelssohn in the UAE Derby. He misfired in the Kentucky Derby. We can forgive them for that. If, in fact, Dermisot Agaki ran faster than Mendelssohn, then that puts his figure somewhere north of 106 and makes him the fastest horse in the race. So I think this is a serious horse. Talk just real briefly about the challenge from Dubai to Kentucky. There have only been 2 horses, or this will be the second horse, I believe, to start at. I expect him to start single digits. Mendelssohn was the only single digit price in the Kentucky Derby from Dubai. So you can say, 0 for 18. A lot of those horses, I think, were throwouts anyway. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I mean, Mendelssohn was the one horse that you could make a case for. Most of those horses just clearly have not been good enough. While we've got the other Japanese horse on the screen, I should mention my plan as of a week ago was to go for a giant home run and to box these 2 horses in the exacta and to bet Continuar to win, just in part because he's trained by the leading trainer in Japan, the guy who pulled off that huge upset in the Breeders' Cup, and he was going to be 50 to 1 and up. Unfortunately, his workouts this week at Churchill have gotten universal pans. I listened to what Mike Welsh of the Racing Form has to say about workouts. He's my guru on that subject, and he was so negative on Continuar that I just changed my mind. I'll bet a token exacta box, but Dermisot Agaki is my horse.
Well, based on his win in the UAE Derby, let's take a look at the stretch run right now of this dominating performance. This is a colt by Mind Your Biscuits, who was known primarily as a sprinter in North America. He did stretch out toward the end of his career. That's Continuar back in third. But Dermisot Agaki and Christophe Lemaire, this is about as decisive as it gets in a very fast final time.
Yeah, and the 1, 2, 3, 4 finishers that you see on the screen are all Japanese horses, all of them descendants of Sunday Silence.
And the 11th, 13th, and 14th finishers in the UAE Derby were from the U.S. So it's a pretty good argument to be made that maybe this year things are going to change. Dermisot Agaki is a serious player in the Kentucky Derby. All right, let's talk about a local U.S.-based 3-year-old who comes off an impressive win. It was a decisive win. I'm referring to Kings Barnes. Let's take a look at the PPs of Kings Barnes. He's only started 3 times. Can you win the Derby in your 4th career start? Well, Big Brown did and Justify did, but they were fast horses going in. Andy, Kings Barnes is really not fast enough yet, is he?
No, I dislike him for a multitude of reasons. 3 career starts, not enough. No races at 2. The Curse of Apollo. The track at the fairgrounds where he won last time was kind of an inside speed favoring track, and he got on the lead in very moderate fractions. He's 2 for Todd Pletcher, 2 for 62 in the Derby. This horse is a total throwout for me. I'd like to find a matchup bet so I could bet against him.
He's listed at 12 to 1. Kings Barnes is. Let's look at the chart of the Louisiana Derby, and you're going to see a couple of other familiar horses in here. Disarm, who is a 30 to 1 shot in the Kentucky Derby field. He came back and finished kind of a very ordinary third in the Lexington Stakes to earn enough points to make the Derby field. He ran second to King's Barnes. Again, it was kind of a low-rated race. And Jace's Road, who chased that slow pace, they went 49-3, 14-3. King's Barnes was walking on the lead, and Jace's Road still backed up. He's listed at 50-1. So I agree with you, Andy. I think that the Louisiana Derby 1, 2, 3 finishers, they all look like they're going to be up against it Saturday at Churchill Downs. Sun Thunder is also in the Derby field. I just don't see anybody from the Louisiana Derby making a serious impact, at least in the win end of the Kentucky Derby. Let's talk about one of the biggest dilemmas, I think, of this year's Kentucky Derby field, and that's a horse who aired last time out. I'm talking about Two Phils. He's listed at 12-1. Just an ordinary 3-year-old, and then all of a sudden, voila, he moved to synthetic and earned a 101, the top published figure in the field. Andy, do we take that number at face value, or do you downgrade it because it came on the Turfway Park synthetic?
Well, the number was legitimate, but the fact that this horse had so many chances on the dirt and was not that distinguished, and then moves to synthetic and runs big, makes me think he's a synthetic freak. And his sire, Hard Spun, was a stakes winning synthetic runner. In fact, he won this race when it had a different name other than the JR Stakes. So he you could say Two Phils had a pedigree for synthetic. My big question about Two Phils is, why is there an apostrophe in his name?
Good question. Good question. I don't know. I still mispronounce Forte. So, I guess this is one of those challenges that we have to face.
I want to thank you for being one of the few other people in America during Derby time who has pronounced his name correctly. It has driven me crazy all week to hear people calling him Forte. I hope when they go to a French restaurant and order dessert, they don't order a chocolate torte, because there's that silent E on the end of the name.
Well, I have to admit, Andy, the only reason I'm pronouncing it properly is because you and I spoke before we did this segment.
Well, I've abused everybody whom I have heard call him Forte.
Well, back to Two Phils. The Hard Spun angle is one thing that concerns me a little bit, because I'm not convinced that Hard Spun is a 1 1/4 sire. I'm going to lean toward taking that big number at face value for this reason. I thought that Two Phils ran very well in the Lecomte and the Risen Star. He moved too soon in both those races, lost his punch late, and kind of got drilled by Instant Coffee and Angel of Empire. I think he put it all together last time out. He has trained very well since then. I'm going to take a little bit different opinion than you, Andy, and I think the Two Phils is a serious contender. In a way, it's a reach, but he kind of reminds me of a horse by the name of War Emblem, who earned a giant number winning the Illinois Derby at Sportsman's Park more than 20 years ago. Nobody believed him, and he came right back and reproduced the number in the Kentucky Derby. You're the speed figure guy, and I get that your enthusiasm is tempered, if you want to call it enthusiasm. Why not just believe that he ran fast and he is getting better?
Well, I'm still kicking myself over War Emblem, so maybe I should learn my lesson on Two Phils. No, I mean, this is I think that's a good argument, and the fact that we don't have many horses in this field that you can really believe in. I mean, if he's a big price, I could back you up on that opinion.
He's listed at 12-1. That does not qualify as a big price to me. If he drifts up in the 20-1 range, I'm going to be a lot more interested. 12-1 is kind of a very marginal figure, if you ask me, for a horse that has a potential defect, and that's the footing situation. You should at least acknowledge that in 2011 Animal Kingdom came from Turfway Park to win the Kentucky Derby, and so did Rich Strike last year. Both those horses, Animal Kingdom and Rich Strike, made huge forward moves from synthetic to dirt. I think it would be a reach to expect that Two Phils is going to improve likewise. I don't know that he has to improve. If he just runs the same race, I think he'll be right there.
Okay, a good point.
Okay, very good. As far as the, we're going to talk real briefly about 5 long shots in the field. And those are, we'll start off with Confidence Game. He's coming in off a long layoff. He's 20-1, and his only real good race was on a wet track. Thumbs up or thumbs down on Confidence Game?
I have nothing to say about him.
I kind of agree. Hit Show, early this year, he looked like a kind of a potential, improving 3-year-old that you might need to take seriously. But last time out in the Wood Memorial, he lost by a nose. The figure was not good. It was a 93. I don't think he's fast enough. Would you agree with that, Andy?
I agree. It was. He did have the disadvantage of post 12, but I don't think that's enough of an excuse.
He looks like he's not fast enough, nor is the horse who defeated him last time out, right. Lord Miles, 50-1 shot. He is improving. Lord Miles is, and I guess he could stagger home and hit the board, but really not much to like about him. Raise Kane, he looks to me like a one-turn horse. To me, he'd be the perfect type of horse for the King's Bishop or one of those one-turn races. I can't make a case for him. What about you?
No.
And Sun Thunder, and he's adding blinkers. He just doesn't look like he's fast enough. His numbers are low as well. Yeah. Those are 5 horses that we think are throwouts. I imagine if we did this last year, Rich Strike would have been among those 5 as well.
Without a moment's hesitation.
No kidding. And speaking of Rich Strike, let's at least acknowledge there are 3 also eligibles in this field. And Rich Strike drew in at the last minute a year ago and sprang the upset. Cyclone Mischief, he ran okay in the Florida Derby. He had a wide trip. I don't think he's a true 1 1/4 horse. Andy, I don't know, Mandarin Hero, you made a case for the Japanese horses. Yeah. If Mandarin Hero had drawn into the body of the field, would you have been upgrading his chances a little bit?
I would, and it's a shame he didn't make it in. He's certainly a more worthy horse than a lot of those who are going to be in the starting gate, but I believe he's heading for the Preakness.
Yeah, we'll see him in the Preakness. I think that's one of the things that Churchill Downs needs to take a look at. Yeah. If you finish second in a final grade 1 prep, that should earn you a berth in the Kentucky Derby. We'll find out in the Preakness if he can reproduce that runner-up finish to Practical Move. And then King Russell, he's probably not going to get in, and I don't think that he is fast enough anyway. Okay, it's time to put up or shut up. So, Andy, let's go ahead and take a look at our top selections and go ahead and take us through your top 4 real quickly.
Well, as I told you, my idea was to use the 2 Japanese horses back and forth in an exact. The way Continuar has been working, I'm pretty much off him, but I had to put him in my selections just as suicide insurance. I think that Skinner looks like one of the best values in the race. I've liked his, as you have liked his races in California, and I don't think he's going to attract too much attention.
Well, he's a big price, Skinner is, and then you have Tapit Trice as your 4th preference off that big win last time out in the Bluegrass. Dermot Sotogake, Andy Beyer's top selection. Andy's going to try to make it 2 Derby wins in the last 3 years. He picked Medina Spirit 2 years ago. It's been a while since I picked a Derby winner. I hope that changes this time around. I do like Skinner. I love his improving form. He wants a 1 1/4. He's been compromised by a relatively speed-friendly Santa Anita surface this winter, and ran well every time. And he narrowed the gap on Practical Move last time out, despite a wide trip. I thought that Skinner ran every bit as well as Practical Move and Mandarin Hero, the 1-2 finishers in front of him. Skinner's a big price. He will fire on Saturday. I am confident in that. It's just a question of, is he good enough? I don't know, but his price makes it worth taking. I think he's listed at 20-1. He won't be that high, but he could be double digits. I do like Skinner to spring an upset. Angel of Empire, Andy doesn't like him. His figures are relatively modest. I think visually his last out win was impressive, and it's that guy Brad Cox who is pretty good. 2 fills. I'm going to take that 101 synthetic surface Beyer at face value and suggest that maybe this colt is just getting good right now and can reproduce, or at least come close to reproducing that number on dirt. If he does, he'll be right there. And then Reincarnate is admittedly a reach. I threw him in my top 4 because I suspect he is going to set the pace under John Velasquez. I don't know if his form is going the right way. His numbers are not. They're declining. But if he makes the lead, gets comfortable, and gets brave, crazier things have happened. Andy Beyer likes Dermasotogaki. I like Skinner. Neither one of us picked Forte in the top 4. So we'll see what happens on Saturday. Okay, it's Q&A time. And thank you, everyone, for sending in some questions. We do have time to field a few of those questions right now. So, Lucia, let's take a look at some of the questions, and we'll see if Andy and I can do our best to answer some of them. Caesar from New Jersey says, is the favorite Forte more vulnerable with the post he drew? Andy?
No, post 15 is, I mean, everybody's got a post position that, could be troublesome. I mean, it's really hard to factor that in advance. I mean, I just think Forte is vulnerable because he's going to be overbet, and he's not as good as he should be at the age of 3.
Post position is one of those conversation topics that drives me crazy every spring. Unless you draw the rail, or unless you're a speed horse drawn inside 2 other speed horses, I just don't see that post position is something that we can really factor into our handicapping. It's a 20 horse field. There is going to be trouble. Maybe the rail leads to more chance of trouble than in another post. But look, they all have to negotiate a trip. And if you like Forte, I would not let a post position talk you off of him. He's post 15. If I liked Forte, I'd say post position is fine for Forte. Andy, Dermasotogaki drew post 17. Does that sway you off of him at all?
I'd rather he be closer to the rail. I mean, it's just the outside posts. Let's say if you're in post 1, okay, bad things may happen. If you're in post 17, you're going to be wide on the first turn. You're going to be losing ground. So I view it as a little bit of a disadvantage. Fortunately, maybe I just have the best horse.
Fair enough. I don't think post 17 is a detriment at all for Dermasotogaki. Let's take our next question. Scott from India says, who are the 3 fastest horses in the race? What style of runner would be best in the Derby? Andy, you want to take the figure question?
Well, we have
kind of talked
about 2 fills and maybe Dermasotogaki, but if he's referring to early speed, being among the fastest horses, Reincarnate, I think we agree, could be the horse who steals off Dermasotogaki. If they ride him smart, he could be right there. But I think the advantage in this field, the way it's shaping up, will be to be, a horse who is close. I mean, I don't want a Rich Strike this year, or somebody coming from 10 miles behind.
Dermasotogaki, 2 fills, and Practical Move with back-to-back 100 Beyers, probably the 3 fastest horses in the race. And Andy, you brought up the pace scenario again. That's one of the challenges that I have to acknowledge Skinner is up against, because he's going to come from the back half of the field. And if they go crawling early, I don't know how Juan Hernandez is going to work out a trip. And I don't know how Skinner is going to, blow past a bunch of horses who have been cruising on slow split. So the pace scenario bothers me for the Derby, and it bothers me with regards to my top selection. What style of runner would be best? Probably a forwardly placed horse, and certainly Dermisota Gaki. He went wire to wire in the UAE Derby. He doesn't have to have the lead, but he should be in contention early. What's the next question? Jay from Arizona, why are Mage's morning line odds so high as compared to Forte? Well, Andy and I, we talked about Mage. He's lightly raced. He's an habitual slow starter. His odds are high because I don't see too many people liking him. Agree?
Yeah, there's more to winning the Derby than just having run one good prep race. I mean, the kind of the overall body of your preparation is very important, and a 3-race career doesn't get it.
Mage is 15-1. So, I mean, if you're shopping for a price, sometimes you can overlook some of these form defects if you're taking a stab at a price. I'm taking a stab with Skinner, regardless of the pace scenario. If you like Mage, listen, don't let anybody talk you off a 15-1 shot that you like. But between the two, Forte and Mage, I don't think there's a lot of comparison with regards to chances, who's going to finish higher in the Kentucky Derby. Next question, Philip from Florida. Tapit, Trice, Verify, and Skinner, Practical Move, all have better last race buyers than Forte. Andy, is it wise to use buyer speed figures in one's handicapping?
Yes. I mean, you don't have to be slavish about betting the top figure in a horse's last start, but I view that moderate number of Fortes as a negative. I would have liked to, if I were in the Forte fan club, I would have liked to have seen him take a step up, run a figure of 102 or something like that, and you say he's really going in the right direction.
Yeah, he doesn't seem like he's getting any better. He hasn't moved forward since his 2-year-old campaign, at least according to the numbers. Andy, you said something very interesting. I just want to go back to that. You can't be a slave to the numbers. 2 years ago, Rock Your World came into the Kentucky Derby with a 100 buyer. He had defeated Medina Spirit by open lengths, and yet you picked Medina Spirit to win the Kentucky Derby and reverse that order of finish. Just reflect back briefly on why you took the second fastest horse in the Santa Anita Derby.
Well, it was just kind of a matter of the trip, and the fact that Medina Spirit looked like he would probably get a pretty good trip in the Kentucky Derby. I don't. It's so long ago, I can't remember all.
It's only 2 years. It was a heck of a selection at $26.20. We don't get that price very often on a top selection. Okay, let's go to the next question. William from Pennsylvania. Skinner and Practical Move have the best buyers on California tracks. Do you foresee California horses being able to maintain those figures on the Churchill Downs surface? Well, I think if you look back in time, there have been a number of California horses. The Santa Anita Derby has been one of the most productive prep races with regards to winning the Kentucky Derby. Justify, California Chrome, the list goes on and on. So, but it is an interesting dilemma. Can you believe a number on one track transfer into another? Do you want to elaborate a little bit, Andy?
We spend a lot of effort and time and computer power looking at the figures in different tracks and making sure they're aligned with each other. And we've got a program that will say, show us every horse shipping between track A and track B and the speed figure they ran in each. And we want to see that they are pretty close together. I mean, if they're misaligned, it's not going to be dramatic, but even if a track is like slow by a point, and we're confident it does look too low, we'll just go back and and adjust the numbers for that track, because that's as important as anything we do to make sure that, that the California numbers mean exactly the same thing as the Kentucky's.
California figures have held up quite well over the years, not only in the Kentucky Derby, but Breeders' Cups outside the state of California as well. So, William, to answer your question, the answer is yes. I guess the question is, can Practical Move improve off of 100? Because he's going to probably have to. Can Skinner improve off that 99? Because he's going to have to as well. I think in regards to Practical Move, I don't know how much improvement he has in him. Skinner is a horse that I am convinced will take a step forward. He must, in order to be competitive on Saturday at Churchill Downs. Tony from Illinois, based on his running style, what are your thoughts on Hit Show? I don't like him anyway. I don't know that post position makes any difference. Andy, what about Hit Show from the rail?
Well, his running style isn't really well defined. I mean, he's been running fifth at the early stage of each of his last three races. I don't know how we factor that into the equation. That Wood Memorial was just not much of a race.
It was not much of a race. I remember back when the Wood Memorial, once upon a time, was a very good indicator of potential, Kentucky Derby success. It hasn't happened lately. I think all the best horses go to Florida or Arkansas, California. I agree. Hit Show's up against it. I think he would be up against it regardless of what post he drew. From the rail, I think the chances increase. He could get shuffled back. We'll find out after the gates open. Next question. Bryant, do you believe Keith DeSormo is making the biggest training mistake in Derby history, racing Confidence Game off a 10-week layoff? I don't think it's a mistake. I just don't like him for that reason. DeSormo has reasons for skipping all the prep races. He came out of the Rebel. He needed some time off. I can't call it a mistake when a trainer makes a call. But I know from betting my money, I don't need to back a horse coming in off a long layoff with a good race over a wet track. So I wouldn't call it a mistake, but I will say this. I don't like him for that reason, the wet track situation and the 10-week layoff. Andy, what about you?
I want to see evidence of fitness and sharpness in a horse. I don't think going a mile and a quarter in a field of 20, what you want to be is rested.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you want to be sharp, fit, and competitive recently, and Confidence Game does not have any of those. Could he win? Sure, he could. Keith DeSormo is a terrific trainer. He has rationale for skipping all the recent prep races. I wouldn't call it a mistake. I'd just call it a horse that I don't like, who wouldn't want to wager on. I think that's it for the questions, and I think that's it for the webinar. I want to thank everyone for watching. Andy, thanks for joining us today, and good luck with Derma Sotogake. We'll see if he gets that trip and breaks that Dubai to Kentucky curse.
Okay.
All right. For Andy Beyer, I'm Brad Free. Thanks for watching, and good luck on Saturday, no matter who you wager on in the 2023 Kentucky Derby. We'll see you next time.
Put yourself in position to win big on Kentucky Derby Day with the power of daily racing form. Visit shop.drf.com and get past performances, expert picks, betting strategies, clock reports, and more. Again, that's shop.drf.com.